Okay, first of all, let me ask you, first of all, this is Sam Dyson of Fairhope, Alabama, and your address is, what is your mailing address, or your street address, Sam, or you want,
You want the street address?
where you living right now, if you don't mind?
19387 Scenic Highway.
Okay, very good. Whatever. We are recording. Very good. This is Ruth Rockwell at 2181. This is Ruth Rockwell, and she lives at, let me see here, 21810 County Road 27, Fairhope, and she's going to talk to us about the Rockwell family, the Batty family, which is her family, and Single Tax Corporation, and anything else she chooses to put down for posterity. Okay, Ruth, you're on. Just tell me, start with how you and your family got to Fairhope. That might be interesting.
Probably the why we got here was because my great uncle Archibald Crosby from Scotland came to Iowa and became a Quaker and got interested in single tax when Henry George was writing his book, and there was a lot of publicity about it. And about
now, what period of time was this?
This would have been in middle to late 1900s.
Okay, that's when he was writing his book, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was quite a educated man. He thought he was very intrigued with the idea and followed the trail of the people who came down here with much interest. In 1904, he had heard that the climate was very good, and he was having a hard time getting through the winters in Iowa, and came down for the winter in 1904, 1905, 1906 to the spring of 1907, and spent the time here, talked a great deal to people around, and was very much interested. We went back in the summer times and talked to the people in Helena, Iowa, the Quakers there, and it just so happened that quite a number of the members of that group were Rockwells also. And in the process also, his grand niece had married in the community, and
is that up there or here?
In Iowa.
Okay.
And her name was Isabella Henderson, his sister's granddaughter. Actually, she was his sister's granddaughter, and married Herman Batty, who was a builder, and he was became in very poor health later on because of the cold winters. They had, by 1913, when they came to Fairhope, along with the others, the Rockwells and Marion Smith, who married a Rockwell, and Franklin Rockwell and his wife, and his family came to Fairhope about 1910, some in 1909, some in 1910, and from then on. And my parents came in 1913 with two small children, 1, 2, and 1, 4, and expecting another one, with a few dollars in hand and looking for a warmer, better climate, and they had also become interested in the single tax. By the time they came, the Friends had been meeting. They were Quakers, or of the Society of Friends, and they had been having an informal meeting at people's homes. But in 1914, they built a schoolhouse in which they held their meeting, and also had a school for the children, small children that needed to go to school, for 2 years. And then they had a formal opening of the school and had more students and hired a teacher before it had been done by family members. And they hired a teacher who was Ellen Mott, who later became Ellen Copeland.
Now, was this the Quaker
This is a Quaker
meeting?
community.
Community hired their own teacher.
So this
Okay.
is what happened to the community. This is what built up the interest. And most of the Rockwells and my family, incidentally, I live on some of the same land that they acquired from the Single Tax Corporation in 1914. It was very fortunate for them that they could take up land and not have to pay for the land, so they had money left over to, or had money left to start building a home and start a small farm. Well, my father got jobs occasionally working in building. My mother had grown up on a farm, and she was well acquainted with even driving mules, and her family in Minnesota, where they had moved after Iowa, had a pair of mules.
A liberated woman,
And
right?
so she was quite a person in her own right. But the meeting then became affiliated with Ohio Yearly Meeting and as a monthly meeting, and the school continued till about 1950. That's where I went to school, excepting for 1 year, up until I was a junior in high school when I went to the Friends Boarding School, Olney it's called, at Barnesville, Ohio. And that's where I graduated from high school. I was one of 21 students that graduated there that year, and I was valedictorian of my class. Everybody had to write a graduation essay, and I was going to write it about single tax because I'd always heard about single tax. But after I was selected as valedictorian, they wanted me to write about something else. So,
Well, what did they know?
but after all, it was not a valedictory. So I never got that essay written. But it was,
So did you come back to Fairhope?
so I can't, not right away. I was going to stay at the school for a while and help with the summertime cleaning and earn a little money so I could come home. But the next week I got the measles, and so I had to stay there as a patient rather than a worker, but I did eventually come home. And the next year I have looked around all year for things to do, helping out neighbors and things like that, but somehow or other I had gotten interested in Reuben Rockwell's oldest son, Lucier, and he was reciprocating very strongly, and we decided to get married, and so in April we were married in April of 1938. We lived on the farm. He had gone to college for a couple of years, but he had always wanted to farm, and he thought this was a good time to do it. So we stayed on the farm, and his brother Oliver then went to college because his father couldn't send two children to college at the same time. And so for about 3 or 4 years we farmed, had a dairy farm, grade A dairy farm.
Children?
And our oldest daughter was born in 1940, Ruth E. But by 1941, so that was only 3 years, wasn't it? In 1941, Oliver was graduating from engineering school, and he thought, well, Lucier thought more and more that he really should have gone to finished his college. So he went back, and we went, just the three of us, and $50 a month to go to college.
Oh.
It was a challenge, but he soon got a little side job repairing and maintaining what they called U-Drive-Its, where you go and rent a car.
Where did you go to school?
At the University of Alabama.
In Tuscaloosa.
In Tuscaloosa, yes. I didn't have any particular skills, so it was better for me just to stay home and help in every way I could rather than try to get a job. But we had good 2.5 years, I guess it was. We went in June, and he graduated in December '43. And of course, by then he had taught laboratory physics, and that helped out with the finances too. But it was, the World War II was in full swing, and General Electric Company offered him a job as an engineer, or what they call test engineers, which is a sort of a introduction to the company, where you would travel from different, or go from different departments or different places to get a feel of all the things that they were doing, and then after that, then you would settle down as a full-time engineer. But we went to Schenectady, and it was very interesting. We enjoyed it immensely, but the cold weather was really something. We liked what we were doing. The first year, the first winter, I stayed at home, but Ruth Ann was a very lively person, and we lived in an upstairs apartment. And our landlady said it wasn't nice for little girls to go up and downstairs. And that's what she wanted to do. She was bored, and the children would go out and play for a little while. There was nothing to do. About that time, the government had fixed nursing homes. Rather, they were child care centers that had a kindergarten, they had pre-kindergarten, they had every age child from up to school age, and they kept them all day, and we worked 6 days a week. I had gotten a job by helping Lucier. I had starting a knowledge of drafting, and they had a 12 weeks course because they needed drafts people, and they offered this course, and I took it, and I was hired on as a detailed draftsman. So this is what we did. 6 days a week we went to work, and Ruth Ann went to nursery school. And
When did you come back to Fairhope?
And then the war was over, and we couldn't wait to get back to Fairhope. So we came back, and we had saved money, believe it or not, although Lucier was only making around $40, $45 a week, I guess.
The good old days.
The good old days. But we had been able to save some money, and so we built a little cottage on some colony land that Lucier's father had, that he wanted for him to have, 10 acres, right across the street from where they lived on Morphy Avenue. This is kind of boring, I expect, but this is sort of the way that we arrived at the point where we felt like we could participate in the activities of the Single Tax Corporation. We also were participating in the Friends meeting. We were married there in 1938, and
was that at the same meeting house that's on Fairhope Avenue?
the same meeting house
Is that
on
right?
Fairhope Avenue. It was built in 1918.
Oh, wow.
The schoolhouse was built in 1914, and then the meeting house in and it was a very prospering place. But then the Korean conflict came along. Lucier got a job right away, and then changed jobs a couple of times, and ended up in with the Alabama Power Company, where he stayed for about 10 years. In the meantime, we had Kenny in 1946, Kenneth Rockwell, and in 1954
You had Paula.
we had Paula Rockwell.
I had Rob the same year, and they went to school together.
Yes, and Paula went to the organic school part of the time. Part of the time she went to the public school. Kenny came along, and he went to the public school the first year or two, because I thought he ought to learn to read, and they weren't really teaching reading very early at the organic school. But anyway, he went back to the organic school, and that was his main love. He'd rather be there than anywhere.
Oh, and he was such a good dancer.
He liked to dance, he liked folk dance, he liked the athletics, he liked the freedom of the shop and all the things that he could do in the shop. And he liked Mr. Carr as a teacher. He taught math, and Mr. Carr would teach them a class that he thought they ought to learn, and then he would read them stories. All kinds of stories, and Kenny got a good education from the stories books that Mr. Carr
He evidently
read
got
to
a
him.
good education in math too, because that's his field now, isn't it?
Oh yes, and Mr. Carr said, "Well, Kenny, you are lucky because you have a strong field that you know what you want to do in it." And said, "These people that are good at a lot of things really have a hard time because they can't make up their minds." And how true it was, because Paula came along and she's having a hard time yet. Trying to decide which is the best.
I'm that way. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
But in 1949, Lucier and I became members of the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation. And in 1954,
Okay,
but
I don't want you to skip over when the Friends moved to
well,
Costa Rica.
by 1954, several of the Friends a group of the Friends from Fairhope had moved to Costa Rica because of the Korean conflict. Well, there was several of them had taken non-active
non-combative
roles
jobs,
in World War II, but they just really did. Some of them couldn't bring themselves to even sign up for the draft again when they reinstated the draft, and they were prosecuted as I think there were 3 of them, and given a year and a day sentence, which was 3 months they had to serve. But they felt that they needed to. Well, they'd heard about various places, and they had researched, and Costa Rica was one place where they bragged that they had more teachers than soldiers, and they were very peacefully minded. So they quite a group, several families from here, got land and went down to.
As I recall, I was away at school between 1949 and 1951. And someone spoke to me about that. There was an article in the newspaper, and word had spread over to Mississippi where I was in school. And apparently about 70 people went in the first group.
Well, they didn't all go entirely together, but they were within a very short period of time, within the year. Lucier's mother and father didn't go at that time. They went later. In fact,
there were a lot of additions.
Yeah.
But that pulled a lot of people out of the Fairhope Friends meeting.
Yes, that's what happened. And Reuben went to Costa Rica about 1954. He resigned his position on the council, which he'd held for 30 years, and Lucier was elected to that position. So he was very dedicated in helping out with the corporation.
I guess
in what way he could.
excuse me, I guess we've said this, but Reuben is Lucier's father.
Yes.
So
Reuben Rockwell and Helen Bell Rockwell are Lucier's parents. And Helen Bell came to Fairhope when she was 3 months old in 1896 with her parents, J.D. and Lucier and his wife.
Well, now I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but you started to say something about in 1954.
Well, in 1954, that's when Reuben resigned from the council.
Okay.
And he had worked with the corporations since almost the very first, helping get the summer system implemented about 1915, that was. And at various times had other offices in the corporation as well. So he was very devoted single taxer. He also taught classes on his own during that time. Reuben did, and Lucier picked that up, and he was teaching classes also at the YWCA in Mobile during the 50s. Then he became a council member, but in 1956, late 1955 and 1956, he had a call from the University of Alabama asking him to come and teach engineering at the University of Alabama. And he always wanted to teach, so he couldn't resist, so he went. They told him he could do graduate work as he was teaching, and that looked really good. So we all 5 of us left for Tuscaloosa, and his brother Oliver was elected to his place on the council, which Oliver held until 1978.
Well, now, when did you become the secretary of the corporation?
I started in 1953 and 54. I was hired part-time by the council to help figure rents. They were having some changes in the rents, as they always did, and they needed some extra help. So I helped for half a day for about 6 or 8 months. But just before Paula was born, I had to quit because she was pretty much evident. And I got through with the job too. In 1964, I was hired as cashier, bookkeeper, and assistant to the secretary, who was then C.A. Gaston, had been ever since his father,
Who was E.B. Gaston?
Who was E.B. Gaston,
Yeah.
had became unable to hold the position.
So I was wondering how that succession came. I didn't know who had it between E.B. and Corny.
Yeah, that was Corny became an officer in 1936 and became, I believe, officially secretary in 1938. But he was in the office so that he could help his father because he was failing and needed help. So in 1954, I went to work as a full-time employee, and he and I were the only ones in the office then. He was the secretary, and I was his assistant and the cashier bookkeeper.
And then y'all left to go to Tuscaloosa, right?
This was after we had been in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, I see.
And came back, and Lucier changed jobs and was now working at International Paper Company.
I see. Okay.
At the time that he went to work for International Paper Company, he was using the state-of-the-art calculating machines and everything for working with electrical engineering problems with the International Paper Company. And by the time I had gone to work there, International Paper Company had put in the first IBM computer system in the South. It took a whole big building. It was so huge.
Yeah, they're all
and
tiny
he
chip.
was in charge of the programming for that computer. He did everything from the budget for the entire IP company, but to working on forestation and with the forestry department in land problems because of his connection with a single tax. They felt like he knew enough to tell them about land and the values of land and when to get rid of them and when to keep them and how to handle it. And he was soon working on a method of adapting the summer system to the computer. And by 1970, that had been developed to the point where he could talk about putting it into effect. It didn't change the summer system appreciably at all. It was just a method of taking care of the relative values of the different properties, which is very important.
Maybe we ought to say that the summer system is a way to evaluate property,
Yes,
right?
the summer system was, well, should have been mentioned at the beginning. The summer system was a way of handling land and evaluating it.
Okay.
And the single tax, in case nobody knows what I'm talking about.
That seems to be one of the problems with it, is that
Yeah.
people don't understand it.
Well, it's so simple that it is hard to understand. It is simple, and yet it can be made very complicated. And there are so many aspects that enter into it. And this was the different opinions. Some people say, well, you can't evaluate land. There's nothing you can put your finger on. It's just
Demand.
It's just
Market, yeah.
No, it wasn't even demand. It was just the opinion.
Okay.
And
Just
opinion.
like baseball cards, huh?
Right. It was just opinion. It was absolutely subjective. It just what one person thought was
Valuable, had to be valuable, yeah.
Yeah, and this is true. But it all boils down to, well, how much would you pay for it?
That's right.
So you had to take into consideration the effect of a composite of people's evaluation. And there were a lot of things that came into that. It was considered a more valuable location, and it's always location. And so the relative locations is what we had to deal with. Then we could, if we had a relative value, then you can lower the rate up or down to make it fit the market or the true value, whatever, true rental value.
We could make a whole tape on the summer system. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that's
so
already
you
been
could
done,
go-
though.
That would be, you could go into all the details of how you arrive at the value of one lot against of the same size with another lot of the same size. The thing about two lots side by side, that everything seems absolutely the same. They aren't, because the one on this side, if there's things over here that are more enticing than the things the other way, the one nearest to it is a
Little bit better.
just a
Right.
little bit better, or maybe more than a little bit if it happens to have better access. So access and location, the natural qualities of the land,
The size.
the size, and in access you have, all right, you have maybe just a little bit of access here, and you have land that should be, or it's in line to be developed, and you don't have road. That's not as valuable until it gets the road. And the single tax corporation had up until that time, it had given the right of way for all of the lands on the original flats.
Mm-hmm.
Before it leased land, it would have reserved right of way on that leasehold. The paving of streets didn't start to happen until about 1935. I'm putting her to sleep on it.
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I'm making sure where my microphone is where it ought to be, and it is. I'm still learning about my equipment here. Excuse me, go ahead.
The first paving of roads was Fairhope Avenue in about 1935, 34 and 35.
Uh-huh.
At about the same time that they put in the first sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
And the corporation paid for the paving of the street and helped out with the sewer system. At least the streets that were facing colony land. Or colony land was facing the street.
Okay, now you say you worked there in 53 and 54, but you also worked there
Then in 64.
Okay.
In
okay.
64, then 10 years later, I went to work full time.
And you were secretary, right? Or were you
No.
assistant?
I was
Corny resigned.
cashier, bookkeeper, and assistant to the secretary.
Okay, and then Corny resigned in.
In 72.
Okay.
So there were 8 years that I was learning the ropes, so to speak.
And then you were
In-
the secretary for how many years?
6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah. I stood for re-election 6 times, for election and re-election 6 times. During that time, well, in 1970 was when it started putting into effect the summer system.
We can stop this if you like.
Yeah.
And if you get the telephone. Okay, we're back on. Now, where were we?
Okay, we were up to about 1970.
Okay.
But let me tell you a little bit about what I did.
Yeah.
What we did. Corny was the secretary, and he took minutes at the council meetings and kept records. And that meant that we were a small probate office, in effect, because there were up to almost 1,200 leaseholds. We saw that acted as agent in assessing the property for the lessees. They would come in and give us the information, and we would have books in the office to send back to the tax assessor, all filled out and signed. We had, the bills were sent to us, and we paid the taxes on the land and on the improvements on the land, as long as the total of it did not exceed the amount of rent that they were paying to us. The leasehold was paying.
You paid it up to that amount.
We paid it up to that amount.
And then the leasehold lessee was responsible for the rest of his taxes.
Anything over that.
Yeah.
Usually we had a few that would have excess, what we called excess taxes. It was in excess of the rent. But not a whole lot, unless somebody had an extremely valuable improvement on the leasehold. At that time, now since they're building hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of buildings, it's a different story, but they still are responsible for that. The corporation is not responsible for only a part of it. This was one of the jobs that we had to do. We had to keep track of all the money that came in and pay all bills. The council made the decisions about what was done. We had to carry them out. I had to calculate rents, and at that time it involved trigonometry and a lot of calculating if anybody's rents were changed other than by percentage, or a raising and lowering of the rate. If someone's property, I don't know just why they would change an individual leasehold, but if it were divided, then you had to divide that rent between the two parcels. And that was most of what it was about, until this total reevaluation of frontage rates. And the way that was handled, the most valuable location was considered as the 100% point, and everything else was rated
in relation
to that, by distance, by size, by
location.
Location. That was the way it was done. When the new system was put in, we had to change a lot of the calculating part of it to put it on the computer. We didn't change the things, but we changed. What was changed was that it was not a matter of opinion, a committee going out and saying, well, this ought to be a 5 and that's a 10. And it was done by coordinates, the distance from various points, so that if a person had, well, that was one part of it, was the distance from other locations that had been determined. These were all compared to sale prices, relative sale prices also, which we could do with the computer. It was very difficult to handle that. I just figured.
Yeah, just by eyeballing it.
Just eyeballing. Then some of the things that were considered was, does it have paving? Or is it dirt road? First, is it dirt road? First, is it any road?
Is there a road?
First, is it any road? Then, is it a dirt road? Is it paved road? That was 3 different ratings.
Water and sewer.
Then, does it have water? Does it have sewer? Are the usual things like electricity and telephone and
Gas.
not gas. Gas was a different. Gas was another one of those. This was one of. Gas was one of them. Like, if you have gas or if you have. Now, it probably shouldn't have been any different, except in gas is a little more localized.
Right. Some areas just don't have access to natural
Yeah.
gas.
Yeah.
To me, that's a big advantage.
Yeah.
And may not be to a lot of people, but.
Well, it's considered an advantage. Then sidewalks, curb and gutter. Those were the main things that were considered just
Yeah.
offhand. If it had the chart in front of me, I could tell you more accurately.
Yeah.
But that's the main things. That was the
In assessing,
kind of things.
in assessing the value of the property.
One
and setting
in
the rent.
relation to each other.
Yeah, that was for establishing the rent.
Yeah,
Right.
but that was that entered into the relative values.
Right.
Because if it was right downtown and it didn't have any
Access.
access, now it wasn't whether they were connected to it, but whether it had access, because the connection belongs to the individual. So that was their value. But in the beginning, the natural qualities such as timber and things like that were evaluated, and you paid it at the time that you took up the land. For instance, this land here had very little natural native timber, virgin timber on it, or probably not any. Has some saplings, some.
That's when your family bought it?
When my
Oh,
family
so leased
got
it?
When they took it up. But they were big enough, some of them were big enough so that they were able to use it for some lumber, have it sawed, and later on they sold some, and in places around, people turpentine the pine trees.
That's right. I remember that.
They would come around with their little tool and slash this crossways, make a little V, and put a piece of metal underneath it, a sort of a lip underneath it, and then a container, aluminum or some container to catch the flow of the sap, and well, the sap would thicken, and it was real, just kind of white gum that you couldn't get off of anything.
That's right. I got it on my hands many times. Stuck there for days.
Yes, but this was a valuable thing, and people had paid for their timber so they could do what they wanted to with it. That was until about 1926, when we had the hurricane and they popped off where they'd been turpentine.
Oh, really? That's interesting. They broke where
They broke where there had been
where they had cut.
turpentine.
Oh my goodness.
You know, they called them cat faces, where it had been. They would come back and do another every so
Slash,
often,
yeah,
another
yeah.
slash across every so often to make it so it would come out.
Mhm.
The sap would come out, And so it would be sometimes 6 or 8 feet of that or more, as high as you could reach, probably.
Yeah.
And that was a weak spot in the timber.
And they broke off there.
And they would break off in the 1926 storm, I remember.
That was really a bad storm.
Yeah, real hard winds, and a lot of them went over. Some of them around here that hadn't been turpentine came up by the roots, because we have such a shallow hard pan under the soil that the roots were all spread out, and they didn't have a deep taproot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just fell over. They just uprooted. Oh my goodness.
That's the way it was. Wow. I guess I don't remember about 1916. I do remember 1926.
Well, I've heard about it.
So,
Okay, so what were, do you remember any of the changes that took place while you were working in the colony office, or?
Well, in about 1969, we hired, well, at times we would have, like Butch Sheldon would come in and work or if I needed to be off or took vacation, we stopped working on Saturdays and didn't have Thursdays off anymore, Thursday afternoons off.
Mm-hmm.
This was a tradition in Fairhope.
Oh yeah,
That
that's
everything
right.
closed up on Thursday afternoons, and everybody went to Mobile because that was well, the various things. I think
To the beach.
the causeway was free on Thursday afternoons, and things.
The causeway was free.
Yes.
Did they charge for the causeway?
Oh yes.
Oh my, that was before my time.
But then
How much did they charge to
I
go
think
across
it
the
was
causeway?
$1 or something.
Good heavens, that was a lot of money back then.
Yes. I'm not positive about just when they charged what, but it was free on Thursday afternoons at one time.
Oh, so that's why they closed. Oh, see, I learned something. Oh my goodness.
Well, there may have been other reasons, but that was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we'd worked on Saturdays, but we had Thursday afternoons off. But it worked better for me, and Corny didn't mind. He was very agreeable about many things, but if they were important, there was no changing it. It had to be right.
Had to be done.
And I appreciated that so much because nothing was slipshod. Everything came out all right, and you did not have to worry about mistakes or just something not being done quite right. He did things very, very carefully. It was really, really a wonderful experience to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit of a perfectionist myself, and so we got along real well.
It takes one to like one.
If we wanted to change something, sometimes I would, I guess it's all right to tell it now, but I would just sort of, I wouldn't say let's do something, I would just mention something that somebody was doing, or it might be nice if we did something that way, or something like that, and then I just let it drop it. And after a while, I wouldn't say anything more about it. And it could be a month, it could be 6 months. He would bring it up, say, well, why don't we do it this way, or that way. I don't know whether he was conscious of it or not, that I had planted the seed, but a number of things were done that way. When it came to, well, one of the things that happened also was that the Feral Courier, which had been in the Gaston family all along from the very beginning, was sold. And we shared the building with the Courier.
That's right, yeah.
We had what is now the library and the secretary's office. And that is all we had. And it included a restroom.
Just about half of what they have now.
Oh, not half. It was not even half.
Okay.
It just went back to where the main lobby came to. It was just the other half of that. So it had a little partition in the back, but that was just for storage and for the restroom back there. And that was all the room there was. And we kept all the valuable papers in a safe at night, mainly to keep them from being fire. There wasn't. It wasn't that we were afraid of somebody breaking in or anything particularly, but there had been a fire upstairs and had destroyed some of the records at one time. So that, I guess after that they got the safe. It was about. It was sitting there. It was about 2 feet by maybe 30 inches.
My goodness, and all the papers fit in
And
there? My household papers wouldn't fit in there.
It was probably about 5.5 feet high.
How about that?
And it was well padded, you know.
Yeah,
because the inside of it wasn't that big.
That's right.
And we had the records clear back to the beginning, the minutes and the financial records and things like that.
Yeah, and those are still there, aren't they?
Well, then when the Courier was sold, the corporation bought the building. But the paper was still operated there for a little while, and then they moved over to what had been the post office, Fairhope Avenue across the street, where it is now. And
what
we
about
were
what
going
year
to
was
then
that?
remodel. What?
Oh, excuse me. About what year was that?
And that was in between 64 and 70.
Okay.
Yeah,
I guess it was. That's right. Before we left here.
In 64, I think it was sold. That was the same year that the corporation gave the library their ownership of the library to the city. So a lot of things happened right about the same time there. Lucier and I met. They said they wanted to remodel it, and they need to make up plans. And Lucier got the idea, well, why don't we get together and draw it up? So he and I drew up plans for what we thought we needed for the office, what the office space needed. And then Lucier made a model, and we presented it at the annual meeting. Everybody looked at it, talked about it. Well, yeah, that's what you need. Go ahead and do it. So Sam was the contractor to do that, and we worked together.
Sam Dyson, right?
Sam Dyson. And we worked together, and somehow we could get eye to eye on most everything that was going on. He would want to know what I wanted, and I would tell him why. And he was very good at. I was used to doing that because Lucier and I had been building houses and things all along together, and we would discuss it that way. So it wasn't hard for me. I don't know whether it was hard for him or not. He didn't complain. He was very agreeable. And he did a good job of it. And it's essentially like it is now. He made the vault, which is a lot more room than we ever had before.
Is it fireproof?
And fireproof, definitely.
Oh, good. So that's where the papers
are.
are.
It's a room. It is a room. Yeah. It's the room that you don't go into when you go into the next, up that step and go back to the back. It's the wall of that on the west is the wall.
I see.
Wall. And they put in regular two bathrooms, and then that back room was sort of for drafting, and they got us a drafting table, and so that we could draw up well, actually there were maps. Incidentally, they still have the ones that I drew up of the various areas and office rooms and just small ones for each leasehold or for each lot or things like that. So
Did you draw maps of every leasehold or just some of the leaseholds?
Well, in a block, I would have all of the divisions in it, and with the dimensions, street names, street names. And this is one of the things I like to do, is draw the maps.
I'm thinking I better put this camera a little closer. I hope I haven't missed everything you've said. Let me turn it off just a minute.
Running out of
All right, let's try this and see if the sound might pick up a little better. If we haven't gotten you right, Ruth, we're going to be back out here. You'll have to go through this all again.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, so we're up to the vault at least.
Yeah. And the room back there is quite important. We had coffee.
Oh yeah, that's important. It sure
We
is.
had coffee at 10 and 2. No, 10 and 3. Mainly at 10, but lots of times at 3. Most always. And there were days that it was necessary, very necessary. Because especially after the new rents had been installed, and the new system had been installed, and a portion of the rents, the rents had been adjusted, but not to the full extent that they would go to eventually. And just because it was computer, I guess, or just because people were wanting to be disturbed about something, or just because any change brings on controversy, and I think we can note that right today, things got kind of sticky around the office. People would come in and complain, or they didn't come in and they complained. They had meetings and complained. They did all kinds of things and complained, which you can expect a certain amount of that, but it was unfortunate that we happened to be in the middle. We had to answer to the council, and then we had to answer to the lessees who came in. And this, well, of course, Corny was there, and Corny was very good at talking to people, but he couldn't handle all of it. And then he did resign, and I became secretary, and then it all was on my hands. Buddy Goddard had started to work for me regularly then.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me, and let me interject here that this was after the rents had gone up, right?
Yeah, some of the rents hadn't gone up very much, but it
and
was.
They hadn't gone up in a long time,
but
so it was time for an adjustment.
Just a minor percentage. Well, also in the late 60s, land values became an issue because prices were going up on land. More people were here, just the value, just the fact that there's more people brings more demand for land, the price goes up. So that an acre of land that had been $50 in the 40s would be $500 in the 60s. Then there were controversies about whether the corporation could tell them what they could sell their property for. People did not often understand what it meant to divide the land from what they owned. It's difficult. You can tell to a certain extent what the worth of a building is. Pretty well tell, but then when they're old buildings, it's a little hard to tell. When they have landscaping, if you go out and count the trees, it doesn't necessarily say that that's a valuable landscaping. If it's just scrubs and you know,
Yeah, right.
or things like that. There's all kinds of things that if people want to, they can argue about, and it's a tradition that we all did that.
That's right.
Everybody, and the corporation would have different opinions about it, and they would talk it out, and sometimes they would, as my father had said one time, they were really discussing it in earnest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was very mild in his manner of speech.
In other words, in earnest was really in earnest.
It was really into it. But there were a lot of things that people could talk about, and they did, and we had to try to keep people an understanding what we were trying to do, how it affected them, and how it affected everybody else. And the worst part was the ones who would not come in and discuss it, or had no intention of listening if you did. But some of those things, and then there was the hurry up and do it yesterday. So we needed our coffee break in the morning.
I should say so.
And in the afternoons.
Well, now, when was the big lawsuit filed about the lessons?
Oh, there was threats, and there was something filed and thrown out, and there was, as I recall, just offhand, I try to forget about it, but it was about.
What was it?
It was
1970.
after I was no longer in the office that the one that actually went through was.
Oh, really? Well, then that must have been, when did
late 70s.
After 78, huh? Okay. So, we were not here. I know all my history's fuzzy on that because I wasn't here. And that rocked around in the courts for years, I know that, and the final decision came out like in the late 80s or early 90s. I'm not sure when it finally got to the Supreme Court of Alabama.
Yeah. You'd have to get somebody else to tell you exactly the dates on it, but it was sometime about that time.
And do you recall the decisions the court made? Do you want to tell them here, or should we just let anybody who wants to know look it up?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to look it up. Actually, the decisions were tried and then appealed, and it went to the Supreme Court about some things, and all. I will say this, that there were no issues that were decided with any degree of culpability that had occurred when I left the corporation. The only thing that they found, that the courts found, I mean, we'd been doing it for always, and it was not considered wrong, but it was tried, and it was the way it was handled rather than what they did. But which required them to pay for the other people's lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Actually, as I recall, and I probably shouldn't say this, but they didn't get what they wanted. The complainants did not get what they wanted out of the lawsuit.
No,
but they got some other things that
they got some minor concessions.
The business about putting the money in or using the money out of the other fund that was.
Yeah,
we won't even talk
was the
about
one. That was the one that would cause the problem. That
yeah.
had any culpability to it.
Yeah.
And that was that since the rent on the lease contract says that shall be used for the benefit of the lessees, that when they took money and made a subdivision, the corporation developed a subdivision and put in all the amenities, and then offered it to members only first.
Oh, okay.
Then it wasn't doing it equally for all lessees.
Okay.
But they used the rent money for that. Now, we did have a rent fund that they could have used. Not a rent fund, I'm sorry, a land fund, which came from transactions of land.
So they just took the money out of the wrong pot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they put it back, but that,
yeah.
that still was,
not supposed to do it.
yeah. As I recall, they had not used the rent money other than in doing public streets.
Well, I'm going to talk to Gail Rowe about what's gone on since he's been there. Buddy Goodart, I think, took over after you left, didn't she? Or
She was
for a very short time.
She continued in her position the first year I was gone, and Donald Gooden was the secretary that year. Then the next year, Don was made president, and Buddy took that position of secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And she refused to run the next time, and Gail was selected for that position.
Okay, so I thought that she was the only one, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to them. Okay, is there anything else you want to tell us?
Well, since then, about 1979, I decided it's time I got an education.
Oh, that's right. I want you to tell about that. My goodness, I'm proud of you. You've been getting educated ever since, I do believe.
Like I hadn't gotten any education with
all you've done.
Well, actually, we had raised 3 children, and they had gotten through college, and they're all the way up through. Well, one of them had a bachelor's, one had a master's, and one had a doctorate. And and the one with the bachelor's decided that she needed a little bit more education, and since she was fresh out of a job, she was going to school until she could get a position teaching. And so she said, "Mama, come out and go to school with me." And it wasn't too hard. She just persuaded. She's a good persuader, And so I said, well, all right. So I said, I don't know what I want to take. She says, well, just take what you want to. You don't have to take anything you don't want to. So I went to college to take what I wanted to take.
And you wound up with enough hours to have 5 majors.
And I wound up with enough hours and enough cogency to have 5 majors, which was called Studies in Western Culture. And the more I took, the more I could see how everything went together. And we had to write a thesis on it in order to be accepted as a personalized studies program. And so I wrote the thesis explaining why all of my courses fit together. And there was French and English, philosophy, history, and art history, architectural art history.
Mm-hmm.
The architectural art history was very important because what people live in tells a lot about the civilization.
That's true.
And the philosophy tells about what they think.
Mm-hmm.
The literature tells about what they dream about.
Yeah.
And the language is how they converse with each other. And I'd already had a long course in economics.
Yeah, right. I should say.
In fact, when I took the ACT test for entrance, I got the highest grade
On all the economics, I'm not surprised. Single tax will do it for you.
Well, you become interested and then you know what's
That's right.
going on.
That's right.
Oh, and I did just miss getting honors in graduation at that.
Just missed getting honors?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, so what?
But it really wasn't what I was going for. And I deliberately, I dropped courses if they were,
What you
you
wanted.
know, what I
Mhm.
wanted to take. And a course or two, I just deliberately didn't even study because it was too late to drop.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't want to waste my time on something that I really
That's
was
right.
not into. But even at that, I really had a pretty good grade average. I belonged to the English honorary fraternity. Belonged to the organization called Encore, which is an organization of non-traditional students. Non-traditional being those that do not fit into the 18 to 23 age group.
Mm-hmm. They didn't
And-
have that when I was there.
No, and they have a large majority of the students in that category at South.
Yeah.
So I was not out of that. It was not strange to be with all young people because it wasn't all young people.
That's right.
But there was a good mix, and the teachers said they welcomed it because the older students were more serious,
That's right.
and it helped with the younger ones because they could see that, you know,
They had some competition
they had
there.
some
They better
competition that
buckle
they
down.
needed to
That's
go
what they
ahead.
told us, yeah.
Mhm. So that's the way it was.
Okay.
So that was in '83 that I graduated, and I've spent 4 years as a trustee since then. For the
Oh, yeah, for the
corporation.
corporation, okay, single tax corporation.
Now that doesn't mention I'm a past president of East Fairhope Home Demonstration Club. I was an officer of the County Council Home Demonstration Clubs. I'm past president of the Fairhope Business and Professional Women's Club, for the Eastern past president of the Eastern Shore Toastmistress Club, and I'm trying not to get to be past president of anything else.
That's your goal in life, huh?
But I've been treasurer of the Friends meeting ever since 1965, and I'm on the library and House and Grounds Committee.
Very good.
I have 4 grandchildren and no
Wonderful.
great-grandchildren.
Just give them time.
I've given them quite a bit of time already.
Okay, are you?
Oh, but we're back. We've moved. We've lived in town for about 25 years.
On Belange? Was it Belange?
On Belange.
Okay.
And now I'm back on the old homestead where I was born.
We all love to come back home.
Well,
That's great.
This particular plot of land is where I was born,
You were born.
literally.
How about that?
At home.
Okay.
And my oldest child was born at home.
Uh-huh. Are you ready?
Yeah.
You through?
That's
The
enough.
end? You want to say the end?
That's enough.
Okay.
Oak Street, just for Oak Street.
Thought of something else we need to put on this tape. Tell us again about why that's deeded and part colony around Atkinson Lane.
Well, when the colonists first came, E.B. Gaston's sister, Clara Atkinson, wanted to be part of it. She wanted to come and she wanted to be here, but she wasn't going to take in any of the colony land. She wanted deeded land, so she bought a strip of land through from the bay up across Summit Street and clear over to, and I'm not positive about this, but the land that she bought went behind and to that, at least to the little low place on the east of Summit Street. So where there's a row of houses that are along Summit Street on the east. A part of that along Atkinson Lane and across the street from Atkinson Lane belonged to Clara Atkinson, and not to the corporation. And some of the other land up to most of it was right in there, and some of it on the other side up to almost to Oak Street in that area. But she later gave part of it to 2 of her nephews. One of them was C.A. Gaston and the other was Spider, or Arthur Gaston.
It's Corny and Arthur.
It was Corny and Arthur. Corny and Spider.
Yeah, Corny and Spider, right.
Corny and Spider. Well, when Corny, who was C.A. Gaston, became secretary of the corporation, he felt that it wasn't quite proper. He was a very principled sort of person. So he arranged for the land to be put in the name of the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
But
so the rest of it all around his house, next door to him, is
but some
deeded
of it,
land.
some of it also became a part of colony land. I do not know just exactly offhand. I just have to look at a map to tell you just where. And some of the other lands were purchased by other people right through there, so that the colony land has a strip of land on both sides of Oak Street, but it doesn't go. It's between the back of those first lots and Atkinson Lane that we're talking about now.
Okay, kitty, kitty. Aren't you beautiful? I just had to put this in here. We're back today with Ruth Rockwell again to make some added comments about the things she was talking about the other day. Ruth, you're on.
Thank you. I thought that perhaps we ought to talk about some things that might get overlooked otherwise. And one of the things that I want to bring up was the single tax advocates, which was a group that were organized soon after the lessees group had started making trouble for FSTC. The lessees had formed an organization which declared it in its purpose to dissolve the corporation. The advocates' purpose was to support the corporation. They were active in educating the public and formed a lobby to support the corporation's efforts to keep harmful legislation from being adopted by the state legislature, and were active as long as there was need for their support, and continued education activities afterwards as well. At the same time that the Lessees Association was lobbying to have the corporation dissolved, they also put an injunction on the corporation to prevent it from dissolving itself. Seems rather strange, doesn't it? The single tax advocates were effective in forming lobby groups to counteract such activities by the lessees. Eventually, the matter was resolved in the courts and the injunction was removed. This information was obtained from my personal experience and participation in the education part of the single tax advocates, and most of the members of the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation were not members of the single tax advocates. They had an advocacy of themselves anyway. Another thing that I think is of particular interest as a part of Fairhope was the school called the Anna T. Jeans School that was located in Fairhope area for black students and may have been dated from before Fairhope was started. It was originally located in what was called Tatumville, which is just south of Big Head Gully, or if you're not familiar with Big Head Gully, it's south of the Elks Lodge. It was later moved to the location that it was in at the corner of Twin Beach Road and Section Street. At the time, well, it remained there until integration, when it was changed to be the intermediate school for the public school system. It was supported in some way by the county, I don't know, or possibly state. I don't know just whether it was accepted as a regular public school or not. But it was originally named Anna T. Jeans for a benefactor by that name who was a wealthy Philadelphia Quaker lady and who had provided funding for home economics department to train black girls the arts of homemaking. When we were children at the Fairhope Friends School, we had a literary society called the Diogenes Literary Society because we were seeking the honest man. Each month we had a program at which the youngest to the oldest participated. At one of the performances, the students at the Anna T. Jeans School were invited to put on the program, which they did, under the direction of their principal, Mr. Carroll. And then we were invited to give a program at their school, which we also did. I was impressed with their program very much. A part of this information was given to me by Vera Herman, a longtime teacher at the Anna T. Jeans School dating back to the 1930s, and who also continued to teach after integration.
That's very interesting. Can you give us some dates as to when you attended the Friends School?
Oh yes, started in 1926, right after the hurricane.
Okay.
And I attended.
Excuse me, did the school make it through the hurricane?
Oh yes.
Okay, very
Yes.
good.
The buildings were not demolished that I knew of very much, but it was a good substantial school building. It had been built by the Quakers, and they were thorough. And the school, the first year I went, there was a record number of students. I think about 24 or 26, and we had 2 teachers. One for the older students and one for, there were 4 of us little girls that started to school that year, and we were in the 1st grade, and then there was 4th grade that year. And we all had to have our classes in the meeting house because there wasn't room in the schoolhouse for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went on, and the next year, they didn't have a school. A lot of people had moved away, and the teachers were not available, and things like that. So I went to the public school that year, and my mother put me in the 3rd grade, and I had only been to school 1 year. I didn't ask questions. We didn't ask questions of Mother about what she did. We just did them. And later in the year, the teacher wanted everyone to bring their report card. So I got my report card and I took it to school, but I very carefully marked out that where it said 1st grade on it and put down 2nd grade because I didn't want anybody to know that I'd skipped a grade. Somehow or other that was a no-no in my book. I don't know why. But anyway, then we had school the rest of the time up until I was a junior in high school.
So that would have been...
And that was in 1935.
So it was between 26 and 35 that you had these program swaps with the Annotated Genes?
Yes.
Okay.
It was in, probably I was about 10
Mm-hmm.
when that happened.
Okay.
10 or 12. It was, we went down to the Annotated Genes school, and we were sort of on a par with them because it was not a large school, and they had more room than we did, but there were more students.
So it was a good school.
Well, we were well treated, and they seemed to enjoy coming out to our school too. Because at our school we had all kinds of things. We had a little literary too. That on every other Friday afternoon, we had just the students put on a program, and parents could come if they wanted to. But this was for practice, so that we would know how to behave. And we learned parliamentary procedure. We had debates. We learned how debates were done. We had community mathematics contests, choose up sides and go to the blackboard and see who would win. And we had spelling bees the same way. My mother was always one that could outspell everybody until one year, and Carl Buell was there. That was my future mother-in-law's brother-in-law, and he was a well-educated man, and they stood up for a long time, and finally they just put the book down and said, okay, because they couldn't spell them down.
My goodness.
It was an education for us to see our elders doing things and to be a part of it. And even the littlest ones that could just learn little nursery rhymes were treated just like adults.
This gives us perspective on what we have lost.
I think so. We were most of the time we were all in one room, and a class would be reciting and the rest of us would be studying or doing whatever, and you knew what the little ones were doing and you knew what the older ones were doing. I took German when I was in 5th grade because I wanted to. The teacher let me come and sit in the class because I wanted to, and I didn't stay all the year, but I learned a little bit of German and learned no Tannenbaum. But that was the way it was, and it was.
So in a lot of ways it was similar to the organic school in that students were given the freedom to choose things that they wanted to do and get involved in.
Right. We had things that we were supposed to do, things we were supposed to learn, and we did them well. We got report cards, and somehow report cards just didn't seem important.
Mm-hmm.
It was just going to school that was important.
Yeah.
And it was good preparation for going to the Olney boarding school because they had a very high record in the state of Ohio, which was an outstanding state at that time in education.
Yeah.
And the students there participated in state contests and things like that. They had the IQ tests and everything. And the year before I graduated, the valedictorian in that class had top honors in the whole state of Ohio. I didn't quite make it, but I was in the honors group.
Well, we'll forgive you for not quite making it. Okay, well, thank you. Do you have any more comments about Fairhope? Does that wrap it up?
Well, I think that will do for now. I
Okay.
appreciate this.
Thank you very much.
Recording now. This is Philip McCarthy, and he lives at 19270 Greeno Road, Fairhope, Alabama, and he has some memories about things that he did in Fairhope when he was young or when he was not so young, and he would like to tell you about some of them. And one of the things that he wanted to tell about was the
Some of the experiences I had in Fairhope as a youngster.
Good. Okay, well, just tell me about.
Well, we were talking here at the office the other day, and we were talking about Fairhope in general, and I was telling them about a few of my experiences as far as Fairhope. Like when we were young, the big pier, that's it's known, had cracks in it. It was wood. We used to pick up spending money because people would come over and lay down out the sun, and the money would roll out of their pockets and go through the cracks. So we would dive down and sift the sand to pick up a little extra money during the day in the summertime. Just things like that. The casino, for instance, had the bathhouse, and they would go in there and go to put on their clothes and drop money, and we'd sift the sand from that. And we were talking about some of the work, the theater, the old theater downtown here. And Mr. Head was the operator at that time. I learned to operate the machine with a guy by the name of Everett Connolly. And then they also had one on the beach, and that was Curtis Willard. And we'd go down there and operate the machine and have a ball. The 4th of July, for instance, we used to have what they call the smokers, and that was boxing and had a big thrill out of it. At that time, you know, I think Fairhope had about 1,600 people. And during the 4th of July, it went up to like 20, 30,000 people, which was a great number for us at that time, especially with all the cute girls that came over. So just things like that, you know. And in the old soda garden building, I had a photo of it, and that's where I asked my wife for the first date.
And who's your wife?
Yeah, Lois. She was Lois Niemeyer.
Right.
I knew her in school, but not just really talked to her. And then when I came home, going for Charleston, South Carolina for discharge out of the Marine Corps, in 1954, I met her at the soda garden and started talking and asked her for a date, and I've been with her now 40 years, so it's kind of unique. Fairhope is, to me, is unique.
Yeah.
I have property in Fairhope. It's a different type of property than a lot of people like to think about, but it is located on Greenon Road called Memory Gardens. I moved to Iowa for 8 years, come back every year for a month, and the last time I came down here to visit, I got blistered, and that was in January, and went back to Iowa. We owned a motel, and I put all them heavy jackets back on, and then I started itching, and come to find out I was blistered from fishing with a friend of mine. And I told Mama, I said, Mama, we're going back to Fairhope. I don't like 6 foot of snow in that parking lot, so I'm going home, and home is Fairhope. We came here in 1941. My mother was worked in a cotton mill. We were born in a little town called Shaman, Alabama. It's next to West Point, Georgia. And she worked in a cotton mill from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 6 days a week, 6 nights a week, for $10 a week. Well, the war broke out, and they were hunting for women. So she called them up, and they sent her the money to come down here. And then she started school. She was a first-class welder and a first-class riveter at the shipyard. During the summer, we came down after school. And that's how I come to Fairhope. I stayed in what they call the old Camel House in Point Clear. It was a 3-story apartment house. And then, I guess about 5 months later, we moved to what they call the old Sherman Farm. And that was located at Ballast Wharf. Then, I guess about 6 or 8 months later, we moved to the old Sadler House, which is located at the foot of Fales Avenue right now. I think it's a real estate company. But I've been here since, considering Fairhope, 41. At the time we came down here, she was working a lot of overtime. She's making about $65 a week. We thought we were millionaires, going from $10 a week to, and then there was my brother and sister. My father had left us. So Fairhope is, I consider myself to be a native. I was 7 years old. And I consider my life right here at Fairhope. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Fairhope to me is home. And I guess it always will be, since I intend to be buried in Fairhope. And if I'm not, I'm going to come back home somebody. I just love Fairhope.
Yeah. Well, tell me what the soda garden was like inside.
Well, the soda garden really was a teenage hangout. My father-in-law, Brad Niemeyer, started it in 1929. This is an ice cream parlor. And later on, his brother took it over, I think Mike Niemeyer, and then Kenneth King bought it. And he operated until it closed. After school, all the teenagers would head for it. They served hot dogs and hamburgers, and that's about it as far as, serving food. But
Ice cream.
they had the old soda fountain where you actually got the ice cream. Ice cream was a nickel scoop.
Right. Good old ice cream from the creamery here?
Yes, from Fairhope.
Yeah, that was the best, wasn't it?
They made their own cones.
Yeah.
The old sugar cones, they would bake them in the back like at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to be ready for the next day. But the soda garden was a hangout. And it's just after school, you just automatically, if you want to talk to anybody, you went to soda garden. And I feel sorry if a teenager doesn't have a place to go, that they can meet in the evenings and the afternoons and enjoy conversation and also make dates with different girls and get to know each other.
Yeah.
So it's, I think a lot of it. The casino used to be that way.
Yeah. Well, tell about the casino. Was it still there when you came?
Yes. In fact, I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. Mr. Hips owned it. And they'd have dances on Saturday nights. And he thought he was getting a bargain. There was 4 of us that used to clean the casino upstairs. And he would pay us $5, each one of us, to clean that big hall after a dance. The only thing he didn't know that the people would get up there and get to drinking and reach in their pockets and dollar bills and $5 bills and $10 bills and $20 bills would be laying on the floor. Well, naturally, you know, when we cleaned up, we got what was on the floor. So we would make probably in the neighborhood $15, $20, $25 each, which was, at that time, you were millionaires, or at least you thought you were. So, you know, the memories are there, and you learn to dance at the casino. Most of the time you didn't have enough girls to dance with, so you'd take a chair and get out there and dance. If you didn't find a girl fast enough, you get out there and dance with the chair. So these are some of the memories that Fairhope is, you know, comes back to mind. I've enjoyed my life here, even though I left when I was about 15 years old and was gone a few years.
Tell about when you came back and we had a square dance club.
Oh yes, yes, we belonged to the Fairhope Jubilees. Our caller was Harry Doley, which is retired now from the judge.
And he could fiddle too.
Oh, he could fiddle, he could call, he was a good dancer too. Fairhope, more or less you created your own fun, but you enjoyed doing it. Naturally, during the summertime, the fun was swimming. But I remember the building here I'm sitting in. I remember that as a young one, I'd go out soft shell. In spite of Gaston, bought every soft shell I ever caught, which I didn't eat. But I spent many a days in the old print press here and talking to Spider, which was a good friend of mine. But these are the things that you created to make a little money. Which you had to work. You did a lot of walking, you did a lot of work getting soft shells. But like I said, it was a lot of fun too. You enjoyed the water.
Yeah, you really, one of the things about Square Dance Club was that there was no drinking.
That's true.
And everybody had to come deodorized, and
that's right.
And they couldn't have halitosis. They had to be really not offend anybody.
That's right. There's one of the things, you could be so tired that you just absolutely didn't want to go and just say, oh no, I'm too tired. But once the music started and you learned the progressive square, it just automatically, you just jumped and went out on the floor. And you would actually get relaxed doing a lot of hard work.
It was relaxing.
It was. Your mind, you can't think of two things at once. Not when you're square dancing. You either have to remember the different moves that you make, or you would mess up a square, which was a lot of fun sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was strictly for couples too.
Yeah.
It gave especially the young couples, and we were fairly young at that time, a place to go that you could actually afford. And everybody was the same. Whether they were a millionaire or whether they didn't have two nickels to rub together. You had a common bond, which really created a good fellowship. And you get to know people. So it was a good thing, and I think it's still good if people enjoy square dancing. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
In my mind I can.
Yeah.
But the body says I don't think so.
Well, it was great entertainment and so Fairhope life.
Yes. You know, I remember one day, that I guess I was probably about 9 years old. And the governor's yacht used to dock at the end of the pier. And I never will forget Governor Folsom coming off that yacht and walking up to me and messing up my hair with his hands, and that made me so mad I wanted to kill him. I just hated for people to reach up and shake my hair. And that's some of the things that you remember that is comical in one sense, but at that time it was serious to me. because he made me mad.
Do you have any children?
I have three girls.
What are their names?
Well, the one that just passed away is Dee Dee. She was Dee Dee now. And then my middle one is Phyllis Davis. She's 35. And my oldest one is Beth Elizabeth. She's 41. And most of their time was spent in the Fairhope Daphne area. And they've got to know what good living is, and that's living in a small community. But they, one of them graduated in Iowa. We bought a motel and moved up there for 8 years. But I'm still home. I come back home. And that's in Fairhope.
We seem to have attracted a lot of people from Iowa, haven't we?
Yes, like the town itself, you know. You
Yeah.
take the Gastons, all of those came in from Iowa. Des Moines, which is roughly about 250 miles from where we were.
Yeah. Which part of Iowa were you in?
McGregor. We were at the northeast corner.
Northeast corner,
And
yeah.
my father-in-law and mother-in-law came in 24.
Yeah.
And he's married here in Fairhope.
That's the Niemeyers.
That's the Niemeyers.
Yes, they
Bradley
were prominent in doings in Fairhope too.
Yes, he was city manager for about 22
Yeah.
years. They did a lot of good work for Fairhope.
Yeah.
In fact, my father-in-law was probably one of the smartest men I knew.
Yeah.
He had a photostatic memory when it comes to municipal laws. He had a very, very unique way of dealing with people. He could be so mad and frustrated about the city and go in and talk to him. When you walked out, everything was peachy. So I mean, that's a gift.
That's a gift, yes.
And he was that way.
Uh-huh.
He didn't like it because I married his daughter, but that's beside the point.
Did he ever become reconciled?
Well, he had to, because you know, after 40, they originally married about 36 years when he passed away. And he didn't have much choice. Well, he had 3 great grandchildren, and one was the girls, and they all loved him. He loved them. So
Yeah.
I did give him something.
Right. Yeah. Well, somehow papas aren't always happy about who their girls marry.
I'll agree with him. That I was a scandal, I know it. And I think she made a mistake marrying me. But I'm still with her.
Yeah. That was one thing about Fairhope. It was not really very class conscious.
No. I remember coming uptown, and we lived on the beach. I doubt if you could find 2 doors locked in Fairhope.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had air conditioning, so everybody opened one. But they made a special point to come outside on their porch, wave, good morning, and you knew them all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very, very different from where I was raised. I started off.
Mm-hmm.
That's what made Fairhope Fairhope. I took lifeguard lessons at the Grand Hotel. I hadn't known Kenny McLean and Malcolm and the McLeans, and they were out of my class financially. But Archie Stapleton taught lifeguard to all the kids in Fairhope that wanted to learn. So I don't think Fairhope was separated in classes. If you tried to get along, people accepted you.
When you go down the street, it used to be that it didn't matter what kind of house you lived in. It could be right next to a big house, and people didn't seem to worry about it at all then. Nowadays, they're so afraid the value of their property is going to be something happen to it.
That's true.
If somebody builds something that's not quite up to snuff next to
Well, we lived in Nicholsville,
Yeah,
which was considered to be the working class.
yeah.
Right up on top of the hill. We lived right on the beach. On top of the hill was Donald and Noel Smith, Jenny, his twin sister, and they owned Smith's Bakery. Mm-hmm. And Miss Smith has taken many a boil off of my butt during the summer months. So when we had no class, it was people, not class.
Yeah.
And that's what really makes Fairhope unique. Yeah. And people talk to people, but you didn't have television either. So.
Do you remember when they used to have a blackboard outside of the courier office, and they'd write down when anybody died, anybody got married, anything special happened before the paper came out, they'd put it on the board?
Bulletin board. Yeah, like I said, Spider was a very good friend of mine, and I enjoyed talking to him, and then watching him when he would print the paper, and he'd sit there and work on the teletype and type up all of this print. And he just enjoyed having you there to look at him and watch him and listen to him. But those days are gone, and you kind of look back and wish some of them would come back again. I'll tell you one thing though, on Friday and Saturday nights the town was zero till 9 o'clock because all your farmers had to stay in the field. So there was quite a big deal for them to stay up till 9 o'clock and have all the farmers come in and do their shopping, and it was very unique.
We used to come uptown and just sit in our car and watch everybody go by.
Well, we used to walk uptown because you knew
Or
everybody.
walk or something.
But nowadays I can walk down the streets and I might not meet two people I know.
Yeah.
And it's growing. Sometimes it's for the better and sometimes for the worse. Like for the older people, sometimes I think it's worse. You know, you miss these days of knowing everybody and stopping to talk to everybody. And it's quite unique. Hopefully someday that this town will get back to this point.
And we have people coming and going more than
That's true.
we used to, I think. Okay, you think of anything else you want to talk about?
No. I don't know of anything yet.
Well, Phil, it's just been really great, and I think we've pretty nearly filled up the tape. I think we've got a little bit more. Let's see. 40,
I know I got a meeting.
yeah. So if you think that's good, well, just wave and say.
I love Fairhope.
Right, that's the way.
I serve as an ambassador up here at the Information Center, so
Yeah.
it's still, Fairhope's still a volunteer place.
Yeah.
And we're getting more and more people involved in things, which helps.
Yeah. This centennial year has helped some, I
That's
think,
true.
to get
Renee's
people
doing
out.
a wonderful job on this, and like the hospital, we have the best volunteers in the state of Alabama.
Yes.
As far as our volunteer auxiliary, which I have to work this evening from 4:30 till 8:30. But Fairhope is more or less volunteer. If they want something done, they just start picking up the phone and saying, hey, we need this done. We don't have the money to throw out, but we need it done. And Fairhope is known for its generosity.
Okay, I think we got that in.
All right.
Thank you so
enjoyed it.
much.
Thank
And
you.
I'm Ruth Rockwell, and I'm just standing in for Flo Snyder because she's real busy with grandchildren.
Good thing to be with you.
Yeah. Bye now.
Bye. All right. Well, Ruthie, I'll talk to you later.